people first process is so presented by people with learning disabilities for our friends and community. We talk about issues important to us and interview interesting people to find out new information. This is our way to make a difference, to make our voices heard.
Hello and welcome to the People First podcast. Today we have an amazing guest, one of the leading nutritionists in the UK, Rhiannon, who is the founder of Rhitrition. Thank you very much for your time today. We hope you enjoy being on the show and talking about food, nutrition, and your company.
Can you tell us a bit about nutrition and what inspired you to start this company?
Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me today. It's an absolute honour, and to be able to talk about, I guess, nutrition and health, because it's something everybody should be able to know more about. I started Rhitrition, which is a very silly name. I actually wanted to call my company Riri's Nutrition because my name's Rhiannon. And my other half at the time said, that's absurd. It's a silly name. Why don't you just join the word nutrition and re together? So Rhitrition was born. I started the business back in 2016 when I was at Roehampton University, which is how I believe I know Katrina. And I know who you all know who are interviewing me today. And it really was born from a love of busting all the myths and the misconceptions I see in the media. I used to be a singer, a performer, and the world I grew up in and was surrounded in was full of faddy diets and silly nutrition that is just not really sensible or good for you. So I used my university degree in nutrition and health to create Rhitrition, and the rest is sort of history.
What keeps you motivated and passionate about working in the field of nutrition?
Oh, really good question. What keeps me motivated? I think the constant rise of misinformation, to be honest, the amount of online trends, fads, confusion most definitely keeps me motivated to keep putting a responsible message across, because I see the damage firsthand that poor nutrition advice has on people. In the Rhitrition clinic, where my clinicians and I have dietitians, nutritionists, psychologists who work within my nutrition clinic, we see how destructive for your health poor diet can be, and how difficult it can be to also obtain a good diet for a variety of reasons. So my motivation really comes from wanting to correct this, to put it right. And I'm also a mother now, so I've got two young boys who are, as of tomorrow, 2 and 4. So I want them to grow up in a world where nutrition is an option for everybody.
Can you talk about the relationship between nutrition and mental health?
Absolutely. Nutrition and mental health are very closely interlinked, and it's something that's not spoken about enough. So it all stems from our gut health, where we digest our food, where we break it down, where we absorb it. And we now have research that the diet we eat, particularly a diet that's high in fiber and plants, so vegetables, fruit, beans, pulses, legumes, whole grain bread, brown pasta, all of those sorts of foods in the Mediterranean style diet, which also includes lovely things like olive oil and nuts, seeds, avocados, all these kind of foods, really nourish living bacteria called our gut bacteria, our gut microbiome inside our gut. And they send signals up to our brain directly. And then inside our brain, it helps with the conversion of our happy hormones. So serotonin, which is a happy hormone, And that is also a precursor for melatonin, which is our sleep hormone. So we'll get better sleep, and it's actually been shown now that diet can be just as effective, if not more so, than therapy for people that are clinically depressed. So how we eat impacts how we feel, impacts our mood, and how we perform. It's not a miracle by itself. Of course, other factors are involved, like I mentioned, sleep as one as well. But I would say it can be a very powerful tool to help us feel a bit better every day.
You have recently finished work on a new book, The Science of Plant-Based Nutrition. Why did you decide to write this book?
Oh, I know it's a good question. As I discussed, I am a mother now, and I'm very aware of the health of people and the planet, actually. And I see a lot of impact of global warming, and I'm hot on my animal welfare. And I'm a big believer that we can make a difference through the food that we eat to our health and the health of the planet. And plant-based actually does not mean vegan. And I think that's the big misconception. A lot of the media and shops and marketing tools use the word plant-based to almost assimilate the word vegan, and it's not the same thing. You can still eat meat and fish and dairy and eggs. Plant-based just means reduce those items a bit more and increase the variety of plants you eat, because sadly, most people are not getting enough fruit and vegetables. They're not getting 5 a day. They're not meeting at least half of the recommended amount of fiber, which comes from plants that we're meant to be getting to be healthy, to improve our lifespan. So 30 grams a day is a target. And with all these public health measures being missed, I saw an opportunity with a diet that's shown to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which is good for the planet. It can help with your health as well. And plant-based really is another fancy word for the Mediterranean diet, which is so joyous. But my true motivation for this book is to hopefully help everybody of all ages, of all backgrounds, have something they can read, and then they can make their own mind up about what's going to work for them.
You released a number of other books in the past. Could you tell us more about them?
Absolutely, of course. I feel very lucky to be able to write books. And to be honest, it made me very nervous to have that opportunity myself. I, as I've explained, was a musician before, a singer. I had no experience writing books or the pressure that came with. And I was given the most incredible opportunity to write my first book in 2017, and that was called Re-Nourish. Just a play on my name, Rhiannon, and nourishing yourself. And it was about developing a healthy relationship with food because of the world I'd grown up in that didn't really have one, with the music industry. And I'm just a big believer that the food we eat is so crucial, but everyone has a history, a relationship with food that's different because of how we grew up, how we turn to food, perhaps for comfort. Perhaps we turn away from food when we're nervous, or we turn towards it. And the first book really is about having a nutrition session with me in clinic. It walks you through how to identify how you feel about yourself, and just as much as how you feel about the food you eat. So that was book number one. And that led me further on to partnering for my second book with a snooker player who I actually at the time had never heard of. And he's called Ronnie O'Sullivan, and he's very famous now. He's 8 times world champion, I believe. And I still chat to Ronnie frequently, and we wrote a book together about the importance of your mind and your body, because staying on top of his game, which is why we called the book Top of Your Game, was incredibly important for performance. So how you deliver everyday tasks is definitely impacted by the food you consume. And that led me nicely on to book number 3, which was called The Science of Nutrition. And I grew up reading encyclopedias and seeing Dawlins Kinsley encyclopedias when CD-ROMs came out. And it was something I always thought, there's no nutrition encyclopedia. So I got the opportunity to write what I would call a Bible of nutrition, a huge encyclopedia with pictures, with diagrams, answering all sorts of questions you could ever want to know. So that was book number 3. I then went on to do a pregnancy nutrition book when I fell pregnant and had the opportunity to make that more accessible. And I'm here now talking about plant-based nutrition, which I'm hoping will help the planet and the future of the ecosystem we live in just as much as our health at the moment. So those are the books. I feel very, very fortunate to have the opportunity to help reach people through the writing that I do.
There's a lot of information about different foods that can be confusing. Where can we find reliable information?
Oh, that's hard, isn't it? There is so much noise in the nutrition world. And I actually think a lot of that confusion comes from social media platforms now. Facebook's, Instagram, TikTok, all these sorts of platforms where everybody seems to be a nutritionist or someone seems to tell you what works for me works for you. Now, that's what I would call a big red flag if anybody's saying that, because we're all unique. We all have different requirements. We all have different backgrounds. We all have different needs, and that requires different unique nutrition. So that's point number 1 to remember. So where do you go? I would recommend highly, if there's a certain condition or a disability or something that you want to get advice for, make sure the person you turn to specializes in that area or they have the qualifications, because otherwise you won't get the advice that you deserve and you require. So, and also it's highly unethical for a registered health professional to give advice they're not able to do so. So for nutrition, you need to look for a dietitian, which is a protected term. They will have had at least a degree, or a registered nutritionist with the Association for Nutrition. They will have at least a degree in nutrition and health and potentially master's degree too. And most people who call themselves nutritionists, check their website, get somebody you know. If you're not sure, ask anyone who can have a look and read it for you. Just make sure you check they have a degree and they are registered, because then they are held accountable for what they say. If I say something that is not ethically correct, that is not right, that is not evidence-based, I'm held up there. I could lose my entire title. And you want to work with people that are watched and looked at, and in a health profession, it should be treated as seriously as doctors, in my opinion, because the food you eat can impact your health. So check those credentials for a nutritionist.
Yes, I agree with you, Rhiannon, and this is all very important. I wouldn't go to the wrong person at the wrong time.
Yeah, definitely. And it's very easy to fall into the trap of seeing the wrong person. And lots of people are looking to make a bit of money these days. So definitely check the credentials. That's my key advice, and that they are regulated.
How can you, in nutrition advice, made more accessible and understandable for people with learning disabilities?
Well, I wish I did have the perfect answer for that question. But sadly, until the government does something to regulate my profession as well, it's very difficult. But I think a good starting point for anybody would be to go to these 2 websites. So the British Dietetic Association or the Association for Nutrition. And check, first of all, if you're looking for somebody in particular, you can check their list of professionals because it's on there. But my third point, which would be really accessible, would be to go to the NHS website, because believe it or not, they have some very good fact sheets on nutrition on there, which have to be evidence-based and are reliable sources of information. And if you're not sure about something, if you have a learning disability, or in general, if you're not sure about anything that you've read in the paper or you've seen a headline and you feel a bit confused, often you can search for that headline in the NHS website, and they break down the scaremonger headlines that the press always put in, because let's be honest, in the media, chocolate's good for you, then it's bad for you, then it's great for you, then it's associated with something else. And if you look far enough, you'll find something for and against everything you read. But if you go to those 3 websites, they're really, really credible. And of course, my book, I hope, will be really helpful. I would say the first one, The Science of Nutrition, is definitely a solid resource because nearly everything you could ask would be in there. But if it's a bespoke concern and a bit of nutrition advice, especially related to a disability or perhaps a condition, we have lots of people with irritable bowel diseases and different things that come through our clinic, check that the person you're seeking advice from understands your specific needs and requirements, and don't apply their advice if they don't to you.
Is there an audio version or a braille version of your books available yet?
There absolutely is. So I'm so happy you've mentioned the audiobook because I would have forgotten to do that. So thank you. And it's really important. I want everything to be very accessible. And The Science of Nutrition, there is an audiobook. Sadly, I'm not reading it because it was in the pandemic and lockdown and I couldn't get to a studio to record it.
Food is often used for celebration and treat. Do you think using food as a treat is a good idea?
I do. No, using food as a treat. I think it's something that I grew up with, actually. I think a lot of us did, didn't we? Oh, if you do something good, in whatever eyes good may have been, you will get rewarded with something often sugary and sweet. It's rare that people think a treat is broccoli or peas. So this stems back to our psychology and our food, how we see food. And often, actually, people that have grown up with a reward system around food can sometimes have a negative relationship with it, in terms that they can end up overeating certain items or needing to have them every day, or it's impacted how they cope with stressful situations rather than dealing with the problem itself. Food becomes a soother. But on the flip side, food should be celebrated. And we have the data that I speak about in my TED talk that if we allow ourselves enjoyed items and accept it and acknowledge it and really savor them, we're less likely to overeat on them. So it's a fine balance of navigating how much of a treat you have, and perhaps treat can be something else that isn't always food. Sometimes it's great to have a treat that's food. I mean, I'm all about having a lot of birthday cake when it's my birthday, or if you're going out or you want to celebrate with friends that you've done something that you're really proud of and you want to get something nice to eat, that's lovely. But if it becomes every single day when we are seeking out certain items, perhaps it's not the best thing, and perhaps we should be rewarding ourselves with something else. Perhaps we can treat ourselves to a bit of peace and quiet for half an hour and play our favorite music, or we're allowed to tune out and listen to a podcast, or you can have a bath, or there's so many other different things that appeal to different people. You can buy your favorite candle that you've saved up for. It's how we see a reward system, and it's complex. It's a complex answer, but the answer is yes and no.
What is your favourite part about working as a nutritionist at Rhitrition?
Gosh, the favorite part. You know what? I don't know why I'm hesitating, because it is getting to meet people like yourselves. It's getting to actually make a difference somewhere and spread something good and positive to people's lives. I honestly think that having a career in nutrition has enabled me to make a small, tiny, minuscule difference for people, hopefully in a positive way. If that's just that they eat a different piece of fruit one day than another, because that's good to get diversity in their diets. It could be that they've realized that actually eating in a slightly different way could help their mental health, or that they're not alone, that it's normal to seek out food as a coping strategy sometimes, because that's actually a far healthier coping strategy than other things people could do. So it's definitely getting to interact with lots of different people and learning more about them in return. That would be my favourite part of the job. Absolutely.
What are your future goals for Rhitrition?
So I'm not one of those girls that has a 5-year plan. And, I've listened to lots of businessy podcasts, and the way my career panned out was very organic. I haven't really planned things, but if I were to have a goal, I think it would be to get the Rhitrition books, the work, out there into every school, every university, every library. So it's also a free resource that people don't have to pay for. And to do that, I have to sell a lot of books so it becomes popular. So it's so popular that people think, I'm going to stock this here and we're going to invest in this, and therefore I can help future generations grow up in a different food world to the one that we all grew up in, armed with information, armed with knowledge, because I believe knowledge is power, and then they can make a decision that they want to for their own mind and their own health.
And thanks very much. It's so important that we all do this, and it's so important that students at college, school, university learn about these things.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And maybe a big goal actually would be, I'd love to go to Parliament and I would love to try and say something that their agendas in the world of politics should include nutrition, because what we eat is going to impact every single person on this planet. So we really need to focus on it.
In your TED talk in the Union of East Anglia, you say education is truly improving. Do you recommend, if people can't access information or educate?
100%. My key advice would be, you have to advocate in any way you possibly can, as in asking everybody who possibly could have access to something like a book or an audio book or a resource or something that they can read to online or play out loud online, because I think there are options now on the computer, aren't there? For instance, if you are visually impaired, that you can then click and listen to the audio on the websites. There's some clever software now. So my real advice to those people would be, yes, education is power, but so is how we speak to one another and advocate for ourselves. And the more that we speak out, it's like a ripple effect. Even if all three of you go away today from this podcast, having interviewed me, and you just say to somebody you know, oh, what you eat can actually help you feel better, that can have a ripple effect. You just don't know how impactful one sentence, one line, one mention can be to another person. We don't need to know everything. We don't need every fancy book or every podcast. We just don't. I don't know everything. But what I do know is that how we speak to one another can really inspire another person or get a conversation going. So the more that we can all try and get messages out there to people that don't have them, like this podcast, or if you're able to just deliver one little fact that, hey, we need a bit more fiber, make that switch to whole grain from white if that's what you're eating, just try it once a week. It can be more impactful than we think. Even if it sounds small, it can have a big difference. That's what I like to believe.
That's all the time that we have for today. A big thanks again to Rhiannon for coming on the show today. We really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us and our listeners. Do you have anything else you would like to add before we end the show?
I think depending on obviously your personal situation, but every time you eat, it's an opportunity And I think that's a nice way of looking at it. It could be an opportunity for the soul. I could call it soul food, something that's delicious that you've needed, that you're allowing yourself to enjoy. It could be an opportunity to have a balanced plate, where's your carbohydrates, your protein, your fiber, your veg. Just every time we eat, it's an opportunity. That's the last line I think I'd leave you all with.
If we or anyone wants to check out about Rhitrition, how can they find it? Is there an internet website?
I would actually start by saying I have a podcast called Food for Thought, and I get to interview some amazing scientists and amazing nutrition advocates and people. Ronnie's been on my podcast if you want to listen. And that's free. So anyone can download that and listen to that anywhere they are, from any app, from any platform. And then the Rhitrition website is Rhitrition, almost like spelling the word nutrition.com. And you'd think I'd had enough practice over the last nearly 10 years of spelling that, and apparently I don't. But you will find it at Rhitrition, Rhitrition.com.
Thank you very much, because from what we've learned today, I'm going to look you up.
Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoy any resource we have. And like I said, you don't have to pay to listen to it. It's all free and everything should be there.
And lastly, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Only problem now is I'm feeling hungry.
I am now.
too. Remember to comment, like, share on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. You can find us by searching for the People First podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.